a weird story. I know it's the Bible, and I know it's about Jesus, but it's still weird. Part of the weirdness comes from our disconnect in the modern world with the whole concept of demons and demon possession. Without question, the Jesus who walked this earth in the 1st century A.D. lived as a part of that world. When God sent his Son through the incarnation to be Jesus, son of Joseph and Mary, born in a stable in Bethlehem town, raised in the home of a Nazarene carpenter, and one day walked the Galilean countryside as an itinerant preacher to the hurting people of his day. When God did that, God made Jesus a part of that world, which means several things. Jesus never once talked about a round earth. You know, it's because in that day, the earth was understood to be flat, and the universe a three-tiered construction. It means Jesus never lectured people like Mary Carews and her friends in the health ministry do about covering mouths when they sneeze, because in that world there was no awareness of germs or bacteria, viruses as being the cause of illness or disease. And it means that when people were troubled with mental illness or addiction problems that would cause one to behave in the ways of this man from Gerasenes, Jesus responds in the way known and common to the 1st century world. He calls out the life-destroying demons and sends them away. Jesus has arrived in the Gentile region known as Gerasenes. Almost before he can get off the boat, Jesus is met by a man described as demon-possessed. The man is buck naked. He appears to be crazy. He comes at Jesus from his home in the cemetery, and he is shouting at Jesus to leave him alone, not to torment him. What would we do today with a man in the condition of this one who approaches Jesus? Well, our first response to such an incident would likely be to call the police. For the community needs to be kept safe. And so the police are asked to take this man into custody. It happens every day, right? Right here in our own community. Persons with troubled minds and broken spirits, acting out their disturbed condition, are apprehended by the police. And most of the time, appropriately so. Now, they might be arrested and taken to jail. Or they might be delivered to a hospital emergency room and assessed by a physician for mental health or addiction treatment. But let me say this. Too often, the former happens and not the latter. Did you get that? They're hauled off to jail and not admitted to treatment in a hospital. Too many of the persons filling the beds of our detention center are there because of undiagnosed or untreated mental illness or addiction problems. Now, while we have to hold folks accountable for their choices and we have to keep the community safe, those are necessary things for an ordered society. Neglecting the sick and failing to provide healing opportunities to the troubled by just incarcerating them is not indicative of a moral or healthy or Christian society. I remember from my days working for the Department of Mental Health There were times we had mentally ill persons waiting 5, 6 days or more in the emergency room for an open bed at Patrick Harris Hospital. Why was the bed not there? Well, actually, the bed is there. There's not staff to man those beds. You see, the reality is the mentally ill and the addicted are not high priorities in our politically funding decisions. Who really cares if mentally ill persons stay locked up in overcrowded detention centers with no one offering them relief from their demons? Who really cares if dedicated public servants who work in professions like law enforcement and detention and mental health and addiction services are grossly underpaid and stretched beyond their limits to the point their own safety is jeopardized? Who really cares? You see, in our world, we have made the choice. We have said that a family who owns a $500,000 home on the lake can't possibly be asked to pay $200 more a year in property taxes or income taxes to adequately fund those healing social services. Maybe they need that extra $200 to pay for fuel to run their speedboat on the weekends. That's more important to us than getting mentally ill persons well or improving conditions for those who work among the troubled. Our South Carolina legislature, you may or may not know this, just recently passed a budget for which there was a $61 million surplus. It seems that lottery ticket which brought somebody $1.5 billion, brought the state $61 million. They had to decide what to do with that $61 million, and here's what they decided. They would send out a check for $50 to every person or couple that filed a state tax return. $50. It will cost the state of South Carolina $700,000 to mail those checks out. I wonder how many treatment beds for addictions or mental illness could have been funded by that $61 million. When you go to vote, educate yourself about folks' priorities who are making our decisions. Perhaps the demons from which we need deliverance are found not only in the crazy man running naked from the cemetery or wherever else, for some of his demons are easily identified. Jesus calls them by a name, legion, or mob, which means many. Some of the demons afflicting him may not be quite as obvious as the illness which makes him act so irrationally. Some of the demons afflicting this man may indeed be more subtly afflicting the wider community. For we learn as the story unfolds that it is not really the man who is speaking to Jesus, but it's the demons who are bargaining with Jesus. And in a dramatic scene, Jesus sends these demons to their destruction, and he restores the man to health and wholeness. And we see right before us the transforming power of God at work. The reactions to the actions of Jesus are swift and intense. The demons realize immediately that they're in the presence of a power greater than their own, for they represent the forces of evil and oppression that are active in our lives and in our world, and those forces always tremble when they come before the dynamic presence of Almighty God. But it is the reaction of the people in that area to the healing of their neighbor that is so striking. We might think they would be happy that this man who has caused them so much trouble is now sane and whole. Perhaps they will throw a party to celebrate the miracle of his salvation, or they will hurry to bring Jesus other friends who are in need of healing. But there is no party, right? There's no celebration translation, for Luke says the neighbors are seized with great fear. Eugene Peterson translates it, they're in a state of panic. They are scared, and they ask Jesus to leave their community. It seems an odd response to those of us who are not used to thinking of Jesus as being someone to fear. Why are they scared? Maybe it is they're fearful that if Jesus hangs around, they won't be able to make a living. After all, Jesus has just sent a big part of the local economy to destruction in the lake. And we learn that the unsettling power of Jesus extends to pocketbooks and economic systems. But the fear of these people may be about more than the possibility of no longer having a job. For if Jesus has power over the forces of the world that oppress and blind, if Jesus can heal somebody like the long-suffering man in this story, destroying a hog farm in the process, what might Jesus do next? For who is safe from such a power? And what if I don't want to see my life upset, but I prefer to remain things just as they are in my comfortable, familiar patterns of living? There's a parable about a farmer who had a few animals that he kept in a barn, and the barn had gotten old and drafty and leaky. He was concerned for his animals' well-being, so the farmer decided to build a whole brand new barn, and he built a fine new barn, and he tore the old barn down. And he was comforted to know that now his animals would be safe and dry. The first time a storm came up, the farmer decided to look in on his animals in their new, beautiful barn. And he was shocked to discover that the barn door had been left unlatched and that all the animals had left the brand new barn. And they were huddled in the storm in the foundation of where the old barn used to sit. You see, it was the old familiar barn. It's sometimes easier to hold on to what we know than to face the new, even if it's better. Healing is not always welcome because healing involves change. And change can be uncomfortable and disruptive. The means Jesus used to heal this man might seem at first strange to us. But if we can look beyond the first century understanding of demons to see what Jesus did was nothing more than tell the truth. Healing and truth are intimately connected. Jesus names the man's condition for what it is. Jesus confronts the denial of a community about the pain of this man. And Jesus calls the demons by name, and with his truthfulness, Jesus sets a troubled man free. Anyone in the healing profession will tell us that the very first step to healing, whether it be mental illness or physical illness, the first step to healing is acknowledging the problem. Coming to an accurate diagnosis. Breaking denial is the first step of healing. Now, many of us have made denial our good friend and our constant companion. I was talking with a friend a while back about cultural differences. Given my last name, Stutler, what would you guess is my ethnic heritage? German, right? And one of the characteristics I have noticed about people of German background, at least this seems so to me, is that we are fond of denial. One of the messages I got growing up is that if you feel sick, it's probably all in your head. There's no need to go to a doctor. If there's a problem, don't talk about it. It'll go away. Denial. I told this friend I suddenly understood how Adolf Hitler was able to do what he did with millions of German Christians all around. They simply looked the other way, and they lived in denial. Our own American history has a similar checkered past. How is it that in a country upon which our founding document says all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, how is it that in such a country slavery could have ever existed, and as long as it did? By and large, it survived by denial, didn't it? For common thinking was, everybody knows those slaves didn't have it that bad. Well, if that were true, then why didn't the plantation owners move out of the big house to the shanties on the edge of the cotton field and go out there and pick that cotton and let the slaves live in the mansion with the big front porch? Huh? Slavery only ended in our country when courageous folks, most of them followers of Jesus, began naming it for what it was: a demon possessing the soul of America. And yet we know that when that demon was called out, there was major resistance, and a bloody war ensued that nearly destroyed our nation. What are the demons from which we need deliverance today? They come with many names. They capture our individual and community spirits. They oppress and destroy life in their pathway. We could not begin to name them all. And on an individual basis, we are largely responsible for naming our own and seeking God's gracious healing and deliverance from them. But I want to dare name a few of those demons that I believe threaten us all. The first demon is our addiction to fossil fuel. Why should we even care about that, I wonder? The pace at which our world is burning fossil fuels is changing our climate. Have you noticed? And it will almost certainly threaten future life on our planet if we do not change our habits. Some may say, well, God will take care of it. No, God's made a way for it to be taken care of. He's waiting for us to act. Global warming, some call it, global climate change. Will these cataclysmic climate changes occur in our lifetime? They're already happening, and some say may happen even more severely in the next 50 years. But if not in our lifetime, do we owe anything to future generations to do something about this? Is it in our capacity to do something about it? If we don't answer yes to those questions, we're in deep trouble. We need to listen to the voices who are educated and advocating on this subject. We need to call together the brightest and the best around the world to figure out how we can use different and alternate sources of energy. This is not a liberal problem. It's not a conservative problem. It's a human survival problem. As followers of Jesus, we need to name this demon and call for deliverance by personal and political action. The second demon I name comes with many different names, but they're all related to this one word, greed. Now, I don't have time to go into all the damaging consequences of our obsession with wanting and having more and more things, but without question, the spiritual emptiness which results from a life that is simply devoted to acquiring more things touches not just the wealthy who achieve that, but it equally touches the impoverished and the debt-ridden middle class. This demon's hard to name. It disguises itself as a source of economic prosperity, and even the church has found itself at times under the possession of this demon. The source of deliverance is Jesus, who teaches us to live our lives grateful for what we already have, trusting God